Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of post-ride race event summaries. Some people call these race reports, ride reports. A lot of the stuff that we do, we're just going to call them events, and that'll lump everything in. So what I'd like to do is go through about 7 different topics, and as I go through these topics, please feel free to leave comments and questions, and we can address them either in the discussion in the comments section, or I can create another video. As some of you know, if there's a good enough comment dialogue going on, then I will make a separate video just to cover those items. So the 7 items that I wish to cover with you are starting off with, I guess, results, the prep and the results, then the route, the bike and equipment, clothing, nutrition, things that worked, things that didn't work so well, and then an epilogue. You know, what to think about going forward while also looking back a little bit. So, but let's get started with the very first thing, and that is always thank your volunteers. Whether they are driving a crew vehicle behind you, whether they are on the course and they're providing you with sustenance from a table at a SAG stop, or if it's the race or ride organizer and any of their associated help. So in this case, we're going to thank the RBA, and that's the regional Brevet administrator. And this gentleman, Way, has to deal with putting on the event, but I'm sure there's some website work that needs to get done and administrative, that kind of stuff. And it's all volunteers, right? So you thank all your volunteers. So Way, son, thank you for putting on the event. And Tim Sullivan, who I guess decided not to ride, and he was at the start and again the finish of the Brevet to check us all in. So thank you so much to Wei Sun and Tim Sullivan, both accomplished randonneurs who have done a lot of stuff, and now they are giving back by volunteering for the organization and for us to do our rides. So let's begin with a couple of simple things like the prep. The preparation for this, for these long distance events. So this was a 200-kilometer event. It's really close to our wheelhouse, where we do 100 milers every Saturday with about 10,000 feet of climbing, sometimes more, sometimes less. And, this was 125 miles with 7,500 feet. And I've got the metric conversion, so that's about 2286 meters of climbing. And that's that it's a good ratio. It's not too much climbing and it's not too little climbing. And, as I mentioned, we do 100 miles with 10,000 feet. So this is a little bit better in that 125 with only 7,500. But if we talk about the prep, just before the holidays, or I should say during the holidays, the Rafa 500 keeps you motivated, keeps you riding from Christmas Eve to New Year's Eve. So this year I did a Rev 310M, which is 500 kilometers converted to miles. And I challenged folks on this channel to come out and do 310 miles during the holiday period. And a lot of you participated, and I appreciate it. And a lot of you even said, wow, I would not have gotten out on the bike if it wasn't for this challenge. So thank you for participating, and good on you for doing it. Because of that time frame, that is a focused 1-week time frame of mileage, Barbara ended up with, almost 450 miles. I ended up with about 420. And Lori was in town, out of town, but she got to 310 miles. And Jess also got her 310-ish miles, I forget, 320. But she was working that weekend, or this weekend of this event, so she couldn't do the event. But that type of prep and that focused amount of time before this event on the 14th is almost perfect, right? You get 450 miles, you get about a week of recovery, boom, on the 14th of January, you do this event. So in my opinion, I think next year we're going to do it again, and we might even increase it from 310 miles up to maybe 350. I don't know. We'll see. All right, so the route. I mentioned it's 200K. It's a brevet, so 200K, 300K, 400K, 600K. That's called a series, a Super Randonneur series. And then the 600, or the bulk, the series qualifies you to do PBP, which is 1,200 kilometers or 750 miles. Okay, so the event is front-loaded. If you look at the course, you're looking at 7,500 total, but in the first 68 miles, you've already done 5,500 of it. And that's because the course does this, and then eventually it starts kind of going like that towards the end, the last 50 or 60 miles. So front-loaded, lots of lights on the front end and the back end because you're coming back into the university where the start-finish is just outside the university. The weather forecast. Now, this was a huge challenge. It rained the last 55, 60 miles. And because you're doing this huge loop, you're going to encounter all these different climate zones. And the weather forecast, is from the southernmost point of the course to the northernmost point of the course was 65, 70 miles. So that's a big area for weather, but we knew it was going to rain. We tried to dress for it. And there is another video, and actually I should have mentioned this much, much earlier. There is another video which has just the interview with Lori and Barb because they were on the event with me. And I think some people missed the point of that video. Went off on some tangents here and there about carbon wheels and stuff. These girls are tough. This was a very, very wet and cold event. These are ladies that get cold in the low 60s, high 50s. And some of you are like, oh, that's summer weather. Okay, good for you. These girls get cold. And then you get them wet. So it was between 45 to low 50s for the day. And you're dripping wet. You're exposed to that many hours of heavy rain. Nothing, I think, is going to work except for maybe a trash bag, right? So, but let's talk briefly about the results because I think this will give you some indication of how tough these girls are. For brevet riding, it's not a race. It's not considered a race. We race against ourselves. We race against our previous times. We race just to see how we can push ourselves. So it's not a race. And when the results come out, it's in alphabetical order. This is just the way brevet results are posted. But I wanted to look through them and see what was going on with our times compared to the other participants. So the headline is 20 were registered, 15 finished. There were 2 did not start, and there were 3 DNFs. Lori and I were the first 2 to finish with a time of 8:10. Another finisher, then Barbara came in at 8:39. Unfortunately, we had to uncouple after for the last 20 so miles because I just wanted to get done and she was struggling it just takes an enormous amount of energy, just keeping your body heat. And I think she was suffering because of that. And she also mentioned her heart rate was quite high throughout the whole day. I'm going to do another video about my power analysis and data heart rate analysis in a separate video. All right, so Lori and I, the first two to come in at 8:10. Barbara came in at 8:39. Then there was another male at 8:45, another male at 8:52, and the next female didn't come in until 9:28. So about an hour and a half, or an hour and 20 minutes or so after Lori and I, and almost an hour after Barb. And then we had some other we had three finishers at 10:52, another one at 11:11, another one at 11:52, 11:56, and the last finisher came in at 12:01 on this 200K. Now the time limit is 13:30, so you've got all day to do a 200K. And there could be all kinds of stuff that could happen to you. Weather, of course, but nutrition, dehydration, fatigue, and or mechanicals, right? So the allowance of 13 and a half hours is a good allowance for someone who has no issues, but then someone who does have issues, it just gives them enough time. I remember on a 400K, I think it was, something like that. I think it was a 400K. I had some issues, and I pulled into a bike shop, got back on the course, and still was able. So it allows you some time for these things to happen. Fix your bike and get back on the course. Give you some perspective. Typically, the 200K, it's typically around 7,000 to 8,000 feet, and time frame, or the range that I've done it in, 652. And then one time with an ex-girlfriend of mine, girlfriend at the time, but she just couldn't get the miles in, so we did it on the tandem, and so just to get her through. And so that was nine hours. So 652, 9 hours. This time we finished kind of right smack in the middle, about 8 hours, 10 minutes. Of course, lots of rain. I was talking to someone just a few minutes ago about you had to go fairly slow through puddles because you don't know what's underneath there. You don't know if there's a big pothole, or I mean, some of these puddles, it was up as high as your crankset for 3 to 4 car lengths, and you're riding through this stuff, and you don't know what's underneath there, so you have to slow down. And we'll get more into that here in a minute. So when we talk about weather, there is an app, and it's called Epic Ride app, or Epic Ride Weather app, and it's a pretty cool app. So what you do is, if you have a Ride with GPS file of the route you're going to ride, and also I think it takes Strava. You connect this app to Ride with GPS or Strava, and then you put the day and the time the day you're planning to ride, and the time, and then it will give you a forecast for that whole loop. It tells you where the wind's blowing, how much rain you're going to get, or lack of rain, those kinds of things. We knew it was going to rain, so it didn't really matter to use this app. But maybe you're riding somewhere where you want to know what the winds are going to be, tailwind, headwind, and you can kind of see on this loop what that's going to be like. So take a look at that app and see if you like it, and let me know. New since 2018 was the last time I did a brevet. New since then is now they have what's called EPP, electronic proof of passage. And so what you have is your data file from your ride that shows that you've been on the course. And if all of you get right around 124, 125 miles, and all of you get within 7,500 to, within a couple of hundred feet or so, And then you can follow the trace and make sure that the rider did the whole course. With these early season events, sometimes you would get these little brevet cards that would have to get signed, and they'd get soaked and tore up, and it was a mess. But it was a fun little thing to get your brevet card back at the end of the season, stamped and authorized and authenticated and all that stuff. But now you just ride the event, and your Strava file proves that you were there. I still took some video at each control to say we're at mile 68, X number of feet, we're at this control, and so on and so forth, to prove in case we had computer issues, right? Okay, so now let's talk about the bike. I rode my Bianchi XR4. It's a rim brake bike. I love that bike. And I rode the Headjet 60s, which I did a unboxing video, and then I did a first impressions video. I don't generally ride 60 millimeter rim depth wheels, but this course really allows for it. There's no major climbs. There's a lot of up-down type climbing, 2-3 miles and then drop again, and 2-3 miles, drop again, or, there's just no significant climbs. It's not a mountainous event. So here, a 2-3 mile climb, 4 mile climb, that's, and there was nothing really steep either. I mean, 10-15% grade is the steepest, but it wouldn't last, right? So I wouldn't really call this a climbing event. And so the 60s are great. In fact, the last 50 or so miles, kind of, as I mentioned before, kind of climbs and drops, but is in a general down direction, heading west, and then once it hits the coast, southbound is typically really flat, well, flat for us, and just a roller here and there, and it's 30 miles, and it's usually a tailwind, but we did not get the tailwind. It was literally on our nose the last 30 miles, going 14 miles per hour in a section that we would normally do 25-30. It was mentally, it was really a challenge. We still had all this rain, we still had all this wind, and now in the easiest part of the course, we're going 14-15 miles per hour. Yeah, that was tough. Okay, so there were plenty, for those that like disc brake bikes, there was plenty of them there, and I could hear them early on anyway, all the screeching and noise and all that stuff. But in the end, none of the disc brake riders were anywhere near us for the rest of the day. And I need to constantly point this out. In rainy conditions, it's about tire traction on the road, okay? Your braking system is only a portion of your stopping capability. Tire traction on the road is very, very important, almost more so than what brake system you're on. And I mention this because if you go with, let's say, a puncture-resistant tire, the grip is terrible. It just doesn't have the grip on the road. So you may go with a puncture-resistant tire because you're trying to avoid flats, or I don't know, but I rode race tires, Lori rode race tires, none of us flatted. Even in foul weather, or I should say, in spite of foul weather, you should be riding race tires because that gives you the grip that you need. Especially at that very first beginning of the sprinkle, I mean, it's very slick until the real rain comes down and starts washing off that rainbow that you see on the ground. That's oil slick that needs to get washed off the road before you can actually have some decent traction in the rain. All right, so you have to make that choice. Do you go with a puncture-resistant tire? Do you go with a race tire that's got better grip and better rolling resistance for a 125-mile day and longer, because this is the shortest brevet? All right. My chain, we're still talking about the bike. The chain I knew needed to get replaced. It wasn't like overly worn out, but I knew it was just right at the edge. I'm like, normally I would have changed the chain before an event, but in this case, I knew it was going to get trashed. I knew it was going to get tons of sand and tons of stuff in it, and I didn't care because I was going to replace it. I lubed it. I did extra lubing on the chain and all the metal parts. So all the pivot points that I've talked about on your front derailleur, rear derailleur, brakes, all that stuff, all that was extra lube because I knew I was going to be riding in the rain. Who knows, maybe I would have gone to a wet lube instead of a wax lube. So, those of you who ride waxed chains in a heavy rainstorm, how well does the immersive wax work in those situations? So leave a comment down below if you ride a wax chain. And I'm talking hours and hours and hours of riding in rain. Not, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. No, hours and hours, okay? And I mean hours and hours because some of these folks here that finished in 12 hours, it rained all day and all night, Sunday as well, which we'll go into because the recovery was difficult to do because it was raining again on Sunday. Bar tape, I took a video and talking about the first impressions, and I was like, I'm not going to get this bike race ready with new chain, new bar tape, all the stuff that I would normally do because it's just going to get trashed. So I left that alone. As a matter of fact, there was so much sand and stuff kicking up from the other two riders, so Barbara and Lori kicking that up, that on my gloves I had so much sand that I ended up having my handlebars got all scratched up. So I had to use some rubbing compound to smooth out the handlebar because it had micro abrasions or scratches all over it. So crazy, right? My Roam computer, so I got a brand new Roam computer on a warranty. After 8 hours of riding, it said 71% battery life remaining. Maybe. I would trust it more if it said 50% because it's supposed to be about a 16-hour battery life. But 71% seems a bit high. We'll see how it will react on the longer brevets. On longer brevets, you should just bring an external battery pack and charge your cycling computer. The 300K, it's really flat. We should be able to get done within the battery life. 16 hours is a lot of battery life for a 300K. So that should be fine. But at the 400K, you're starting to ride into the night. And of course the 600K. So you'll need an external battery pack. Electronics, I also talked about this in a previous video. You have to make sure that all of your little rubber gaskets that protect the charging port, that they are closed and they are sealed tight. Another viewer commented, yeah, I usually put electrical tape. I was like, yeah, I do too. I don't know why I didn't do it. But yeah, just find a way to make sure that those ports are closed. Many a computer has been ruined, and lights, tail lights, all that kind of stuff. So be aware of that. And with the new 12-speed Di2, the charging port is on the back of the rear derailleur, on the bottom of the rear derailleur. And I'd like to know what the logic was behind that. But please make sure that that is closed shut. And I'm pretty sure that they thought about this. I mean, the pro teams have been riding 12-speed Durace with that same charging port. So I'm sure they thought about this, and I trust Shimano to do most of their due diligence before releasing a product. Tire pressure. Talked about tires a little bit earlier. Puncture resistant, race tire, what do you go with? My rim is a 25 wide rim. 25 tire sits flush and beautiful with it. The pressure that Head Cycling recommends for my Head for my Head Jet wheels is 64 psi for my weight, 150-pound rider. I went with 70. Normally I go with 80. I wanted lower pressure for more grip. And, because of the rain, I knew the rain was coming. So instead of riding my typical 80, I went to 70. Felt good, felt fine, felt fast, I guess. So who knows? Maybe I'll get used to 70 psi since I'm supposed to be at 64 according to Head for a 25 tire. So that's that. Yes, I did go tubeless, and some other viewer, Mike with an S, I don't remember how to pronounce or remember his name, and so I don't know how to pronounce his last name. S something, Savitas maybe. He made a comment about why I hate on disc brakes so much, and that's a video in and of itself. But then he said, "Oh, you made a comment about tubeless. I thought you were done." I keep banging my head against the wall, like they say. I put tubeless on my bike again because, well, this is what it's supposed to do, right? Lower tire pressures to ride through these types of conditions. Rainy weather, and if you get a small puncture, it should seal, all that stuff. So, yes, I continue to experiment so that I can continue to speak from an experience level when I say that something works or doesn't work. It's what I do on this channel. And one of the other comments was, you said you might consider trying the Conti 5000 STR. I thought you were done with tubeless. I still have to test stuff on this channel. So yes, I'll put on some 5000 tubeless to see how they work. That's what you expect from me. So anyway, that's a short response for that gentleman. Clothing. Let's talk about clothing. I knew it was going to rain. I have ridden in many rain situations in these early season January, February events. Rain, hail, just terrible conditions. So I had wool literally from head to toe. So I had a neck buff that could also double as a head cap. I had a wool base layer. I had wool knickers, so knee warmers, wool socks. Just anything that I could wear that was wool, I wore. Wool gloves as well. And so they weren't a rain-proof or waterproof glove. It was a rain glove with just knit. A wool glove with knit. And my hands got wet, but it almost felt like a wetsuit. Once the hands got wet, the water sitting on the surface of my hand, it seemed to be warm enough. I didn't have cold hands. I had cold other things, but I didn't have cold hands. So let's see. So I had a wool long sleeve base layer and a really thin summer weight type long sleeve jersey. It even promotes UV protection in their write-up. I just don't like a lot of extra stuff when I go riding, and I was cold. There's that expression of fearless leader. I did not want to let Lori and Barb know how cold I was because I needed to show leadership by example, Marine Corps, and I just needed to show them, hey, look, we're getting this done. I might have looked impervious, but I wasn't. I was cold. Next, a shell. So here's the thing. Because it was, for us, 8 hours, because it was 125 miles, what do you do? I guess in the future I'll bring either a cinch bag, so you have a jacket for the start, you take it off, okay, it's nice weather, 3 hours in, oh, it's raining, put the jacket back on, oh, it stopped raining, take it back off. I don't know, something like that, maybe. I generally don't like to carry a lot of stuff, so that's why I didn't do that. All right, so let's talk nutrition. Everyone's always asking, what do you have? What do you have for these long rides? What do you consume? What do you have for breakfast? I've done a video that for breakfast, I typically have a bowl of rice, maple syrup because I like it, butter, salt, and then 2 over easy eggs and a bowl of rice. It's not a lot of food. It's just something to stave off the hunger until I can get on the bike. And if you're gonna have breakfast, because this is the other thing, if you have a really early start, skip breakfast. If it's a 5 a.m. start, what time are you gonna wake up to have breakfast? Sleep is more important in my opinion. So sleep in. Once you get on the bike, start eating, right? Drinking your calories or eating your calories. I knew I had to drive to the start, which was about 45 minutes, so I knew I could have breakfast. About an hour and a half later, I was at the start. So all good as far as digestion and just a small meal just to stave off the hunger until it was time to actually ride. Okay. While on the bike, I've also done a video about the little sandwiches that I make. I could use a lot of product, but I like to keep it for my customers. But the sandwiches, these little Hawaiian roll sandwiches, are really small. They're 250 calories with, a slice or 2 of ham, some cream cheese, and the Hawaiian roll. I stepped it up a little bit. I got these pretzel style rolls and they got these big salt crystals on there. And then I also do a jam sandwich. So the roll, the jam, and then the cream cheese, and then I added some salt so I would get the contrast of the sweetness of the jam and salt. And I love salt. I go through bags and bags of salt, Redmond's salt. Okay, so 4 sandwiches, that's 1,000 calories. Then I had 2 bottles of Spiz, and that was 500 calories each. Normally, I will concentrate those bottles even more. And you'll hear that Lori had 750 calories of Spiz in 1 bottle, and then Barbara had 750 calories of Spiz in one of her bottles as well. So I had 500 in 2 bottles, 1,000 calories. So to me, at 500 calories, it still tastes kind of watery. So at 750, it tastes really good, by the way. So it's not overly concentrated and chalky like some of these other nutrition products. And if you don't know what Spiz is, it's got protein, carbs, electrolytes, amino acids. It's a full meal deal. It's just a complete meal in a bottle. And one of the things I talk about is if you fuel properly, you're not going to get sick, right? And L-glutamine and things like this is all in this product, and you're just fueling properly the whole day. So 1,000 calories for the 4 sandwiches, 1,000 calories for the 2 bottles. Then I had some expired Honey Stinger waffles, so I brought those with me. I brought 4 of those. That's 160 calories per, 640. So if we do the math, 1,000 for the sandwiches, 1,000 for the 2 bottles, 640 for the 4 waffles. That's 2640 divided by 8, 330 calories per hour. I felt fantastic. I wanted to fuel so that if either of the 2 ladies had issues, I could get them to the line, right? That was my goal for ensuring that I fueled properly. I felt great. I know that my fueling rate right around 300 to 350 calories per hour is solid. I can ride and ride and ride. But we also did this ride as a no-no ride. So that means no stops for no reason. So no stops for fluids, no stop for potty breaks, no stops for any reason except the controls and traffic controls. If I didn't have those many calories, I still would have been able to ride effectively because I'm a fat adapted athlete, and so is Lori and so is Barb. Someone made a comment, I'm surprised how little calories they had. 1,000 calories for only 8 hours of riding. Well, they are tiny, right? They're 120 pounds dripping wet. Dripping wet, yeah, they were. But they are not huge riders, and they have very, very, very little body fat. But we all have enough body fat to fuel our endurance events for many, many, many hours. If you're a sugar burner, you might have some issues on these longer events. Without stopping, I should say. You'll have to pack everything with you. Now, I had decided that with this weather, there was no reason to stop. No reason to stop for fluid, for refueling, or anything. Just carry everything on board, get through, and be done. All right, so my kilojoules, so my expenditure, some of you think in calories. I have a power meter, so I think in kilojoules. 4,000 plus kilojoules, 2,600 consumed, so I was still at a deficit of 1,400, but guess what? You're never going to make that deficit. You're always going to burn more on the bike than you've taken in. And where do you think all that's coming from? Your fat stores, people. All of you that sit here and talk about, oh, carb. You're burning fat. Believe it or not, you're burning fat. And as much as you hate to admit it, in this case, if I was 1,400 calories in the hole, it came from my fat stores. Even though, of course, yeah, think about it. That's where it's coming from. All right. So that's the nutrition portion. So now let's talk about the things that went well and the things that didn't go so well. First thing is wool clothing from head to toe. That worked extremely well. Nutrition worked extremely well. I was never to the point of hungry. I always kind of just cut that little balance where, am I hungry? Yeah, okay. You need that gastric emptying. You need that digestion to be happening. You need that nutrition to not just, the nutrition you've taken to not just sit in your stomach and you just keep, blah, blah, blah. You need to kind of let it, you got to space it out enough so that you're just on the verge of being hungry and you take in more calories and you can digest it and move it through, right? So I was just on the verge of being hungry and I kept eating, okay? So that worked great. Never felt bloated, any of that stuff. I already mentioned I pre-lubed everything with extra lube. I already mentioned that wet lube might be a consideration next time instead of waxing. I use squirt, so I don't use the immersion method. Things that I think didn't go so well or things I could improve on. I think I should have had a baggie for my phone. I don't, the phones are usually good for, 30, 40, 50 feet underwater, but I don't know. I was trying to shoot video and I think the water was getting into the microphone and into the camera. So some of the video I shot, I had to delete it. It just didn't work. So maybe. And then also when I got back in my car and went to plug it in, I got that water damage possible, do you want to override this? And I was like, no, pull the plug back out. All right. I probably should have had one more wool base layer, and I think I would have been golden at that point. Thin layers, I'm not a big jacket person. I like thin layers. I like to shed as well, and then just throw it in my upper back or underneath my jersey. So at some point in time, you can start shedding layers and then start putting them on. In a video for Thanksgiving, when we went to Mount Laguna, I wore an Asos spider bag, and that sits really high up on your back here, so it gives you plenty of access to your pockets. Maybe I should have had that, because what I've done in the past is I've ridden with a cinch bag, and then, a big Ziploc baggie, put stuff in that to prevent my stuff from getting wet, or even just from my sweat from my back. So I'd have a cinch bag, but inside the cinch bag, I'd have just a big gallon Ziploc baggie and to put the stuff in there. A dry pair of socks are worth $1 million sometimes, right? So dry pair of socks, maybe some additional arm warmers, knee warmers, another base layer or something, or maybe even a jacket. So maybe I should have done that for this event. And that's where the shell, the rain shell, so that you don't overheat inside of it. Take it on and off, put it in your cinch bag, and keep going. The last thing here is booties. Now, I've seen these velo toes. I want to know if any of you have experience with velo toes. They seem to be on the aero side, but some people use them for rain booties. So please, I'd like to hear some comments from people that have used velo toes. And if you're not familiar with those, they're like a latex type of boot that goes at least to mid-calf. And I think it seals off the vent holes in your cycling shoes too, which is the important thing about wearing a bootie. It's got to cut off those, or cover up those vent holes. All right. The epilogue. When I got home, I soaked myself in a hot tub. In my bathtub. I was chilled to the bone. The ladies, one of them has a sauna, the other has a jacuzzi, got in there, and with the immersion, got our body core temperatures back up. But I was shivering the whole ride home. I had the heater on high. I was stiffening up, and I guess my hip flexors, just that muscle that runs at the very, very top of your quads. And I was just tense because I was shivering so much in the car. While I was riding, I was not that bad. But once I stopped, and that's when everything fell apart. Let's see. I don't know what this note is, so that's why I've been sitting here thinking. Okay, so let's talk. Oh, yes. When I did my very first century, I didn't plan on it. I went out for a ride, and then I kept riding and then kept riding. I was completely underfueled, and I got a really bad cold. By the time I started to do 200 milers, I had that pretty dialed in, my nutrition. So one of our new riding mates, Michael, said, hey, try not to get sick or something like that. And, and I thought about that, and I was like, I haven't been sick in years. But, these events, they suppress your immune system. You're cold for hours upon hours. You're wet, and, anything could take hold. But I also suggest that if you fuel properly on the bike, you're constantly fueling, and then you have a good recovery meal as well, you shouldn't have any problems with this inclement weather, or stretching past your boundaries of 100 miler, 150 miler, that kind of thing, right? Okay. If you're a sugar burner, you're always going to be more susceptible to colds. My vegetarian, vegan friends, you just got to take care of yourself a little bit more. I'm a carnivore. I don't mean to turn anybody off, but I just love meat. Sorry, I cannot eat vegetables or fruit and stuff like that. It doesn't fill me. It goes, yeah. So if you're a sugar burner and you're on these long events, you got to think about how you're going to keep yourself fueled properly on these longer and longer events. But I eat a very, very low sugar diet off the bike. I only eat carbs on the bike. So and then typically after one of these long events where I've just consumed a lot of carbs and stuff like that, I may fast for 24 to 36 hours. because fasting heals the body. I think I think people don't understand that. If fasting, going without food actually heals your body. It goes through, cleans itself up and repairs a lot of stuff without the food. I know that sounds counterintuitive to everything you've heard about six meals a day and constantly eat. And if you fast, it cures your body. All right. So I will do that typically to kind of like a detox of all the freaking carbs I was eating during an event. Recovery rides, we just couldn't do them. It rained Sunday as well. Monday, we finally got out on the bike for a recovery ride of 28 miles, 3,500 on Tuesday. So it was 2 days missed opportunity. If you got a trainer, do it. But I don't have a trainer. I mean, I have access to a kicker. I don't know. I just don't. I just can't do the trainer. But I need to at some point, right? Okay, so even for like a recovery ride, that would have worked for that. All right. What's next? So what's next is the 300K. It's going to be down in Borrego Springs, which is out deserts. And Borrego Springs, wide open area, so lots of wind, even if we have some warmer temps. But I looked yesterday, and I think like the low was 39 and the high was only like 50, low 50s. So hopefully it warms up 2 weeks from now, or maybe it's more than 2 weeks. I haven't done the math, but maybe it's like 3 weeks, 4 weeks from now, February the 11th. So we'll see, and don't expect any rain, so that's good. But okay, so that's my prepared portion. So please, if you've got questions, you've got things you want to talk about, I'm going to try to put some chapters in this, but honestly, I think you'll miss too much if you go skipping ahead to a chapter. I mean, there's just so many nuggets that I try to put in during my discussion with you. But, if you're in a hurry, maybe you go to the segment that you want to see and then come back and then see the rest of it. I don't know. Okay, that's all for today. I'm looking forward to your questions. I'm looking forward to your comments. Let's get a good discussion down below. Let's talk about when your 200K is coming up. Let's talk about when your century or double century is coming up. Let's talk about your events. Let's talk about some of the things. If you've learned something, what did you learn? Tell me how you're going to apply it in your next event. I want to know that I am providing valuable content to you. And if you find something in my videos that you're going to implement, please let me know. I like that. I'm going to try that. And then come back and say, it worked. Or, George, you're all wet. That doesn't make any sense. I tried it. It didn't work. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you up the road.